This is Kelly.
And this is Amy.
And you're listening to Diary of a Death Investigator. We are calling this episode The Final Exit. Amy's going to be explaining some interesting ways to die. And with that comes a trigger warning. This story contains content about suicide. If you or someone you know is in crisis, help is just 3 numbers away. 988 is a suicide and crisis hotline available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week across the United States. And if you're listening in another country and have a number we can share, please email us at kelly@diaryofadeathinvestigator.com or message us on Instagram, Diary of a Death Investigator. Before we start, I do want to let everybody know Amy and I are officially attending the Crime Con Crime Cruise in November.
Join us.
So excited. So excited.
You can ask me all the questions you want for free, maybe.
Just got to find us first.
We'll make it like Clue.
Well, hopefully it's not that hard to find us, but we are excited. If you have questions about that, again, try to email us. We're new to it. This is our first time going, so we're pretty excited.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited because we looked it up and there's actually some pretty good hosts that are going to be on there. So yeah, looking forward to that and all the attendees.
And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know Amy's very particular about about people who give information. So
yeah, I guess I am.
If she says they're good, then I trust that they're good because she would definitely let us know if they were maybe not so good.
That's true. If I say someone's smart or if I recommend them, I would take that as a big compliment because I don't do that very often. So more often than not, I think I call people dumb. So I mean, I guess because I've worked with some dum-dums. So because they're out there. So
well, I think because a lot of these podcasts, and I like true crime podcasts, and I think a lot of people like the start to finish of a story, right? So they like to know the beginning and the background of why of the people who are about to do these murders or whatever. Then they like to hear about the murder, but they also like the closure of the murder, where you're more science-based, where you experience just what happens during the death scene. So for some of those people, it's a bit naive because they don't really understand. They just like the story behind it, where you're more about the science, right? So you don't like when people give false information.
I'm giving you real facts, people. You should appreciate it. So
it's Amy's Death Investigation School.
Yeah, exactly. Learning you up. So
all right. Well, learn us up on this episode.
All right. So I think to start with, maybe we should tell the people why we've chosen this title. So there's this book, or I guess there's multiple books now because Kelly looked this up after I told her. And this kind of leads way into the story. And there's multiple podcasts that have mentioned these books before. And this book is called The Final Exit, and it's the practicalities of self-deliverance and assisted suicide for the dying. And not necessarily for the dying, as you'll figure out. And so this guy that wrote this, I believe that this one is written in 1991. And it's basically a book of all these different ways that you can end your life or help someone end their life. And most of the podcasts that I have listened to, because it really is quite interesting in the way that the laws have been established here in the United States on assisted suicide.
And we should note, though, this guy is not from the U.S. I believe he's English.
That's what you had said. You read that from an article, right? So this book, which I don't even know how it's legal, and maybe it has been shipped overseas. So that could be something as well. But I mean, you can get anything off eBay, I think. So the dark web. Yeah, I think a lot of the cases that I've listened to about these assisted suicides, they've noted that this book has been like bedside upon the arrival at the scene of these deaths. And I mean, a lot of these, they appear to be humane type of deaths where the person dies in a, how do I want to say this? In a way that they're not in pain. So I think that's what some of these people are searching for in some of these cases. But in this instance, I think a lot of people would be like, oh, this guy got off kind of easy.
Well, let me back up real fast and talk about the author, because when we did the research on him, he actually had a wife who was dying of cancer. And I don't want to say he was there when she had committed suicide using pain medication. And then the interesting part was he got remarried, got divorced, and then that woman ended up committing suicide, I think, in a similar manner. And she had also had cancer, but was in remission. So I just thought it was interesting that he had two people in his life in similar situations.
Now, was that in the United States where that happened? Did it say?
I don't think so, but I didn't double check.
Okay, so assisted suicide is technically unlawful here in the US, or it has been really up until here recently. Now there has been laws that have been passed, and more states now have been passing laws for this. So now it's up to 11 what they would consider jurisdictions here, and which is surprising to me. I think for a long time it was only like Oregon and Vermont and like Washington, so like only like a couple of northern states, and now it's spread to California, Colorado, Hawaii, Montana, Maine, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, the state of Washington, and the District of Columbia. So technically DC isn't its own state, but I think maybe that's why they said jurisdictions instead of states. So that's interesting to me, because technically by law, if you're assisting someone in that act, it's technically like homicide, or it would be like felony murder, because if you are like assisting, or if you are like present for the act of murder or a felonious activity, technically that would consider it felony murder. So yeah, it's interesting that so many states have done that, and maybe because they've just seen so many of these cases. I think a lot of these people have like these terminal diseases, and a lot of times where I've seen it, and maybe they think they're like kind of like mercy killings. A lot of times I see it where it's like people don't want to go into like a nursing home where, their body fails them and they still have like their mind, or they don't want to be like a burden to their family, that kind of situation. So this guy, though, he just didn't want to go to jail for being in trouble and being a dirtbag. So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've had a couple of these cases actually where this has happened, and I'm like, ugh, and this is my own personal opinion, but you kind of wish that they would have been caught sooner than before they were able to get away with what they did. So when I got this call, I was still working in-house, so it was in the city, and this poor cleaning maid, it was at a Motel 6. Of course, she was making her rounds, cleaning rooms, and she knocks on the door. Of course, no one answers, and so she comes in, and she sees this guy unresponsive on the bed, and she sees kind of a weird scene that she really can't explain. And so she tells management, and management calls the police. And so the police, of course, they arrive and they're like, this is really weird. And luckily the police here are really great at their job and they don't touch or disturb anything there. And they're like, well, we're going to call the medical examiner first and wait for them to arrive before we move anything, because you don't see something like this too often either. And so, yeah, they waited for me to get there. And this is definitely something that I hadn't seen before. So the way they describe this to me is that this gentleman that they believe, he's in his 50s, he's a white male, and they know this because they just find an ID in there. But this guy is laying on the bed, supine, so he's on his back. And they said this guy had put a bag over his head, and there was a tank next to the bed that they believed to be helium. And they thought that he had used it to suffocate himself. And I'm like, that's interesting, because that's quite like a setup that you have to do to keep a constant flow or to even like trap that. Yeah, kind of weird. So yeah, I get there and that's exactly what it was. He had gone to like a party store.
I was going to say Party City is the only one.
Yeah, because like who rents out like a helium tank anymore, right? So yeah, he had rented out a helium tank.
Was it a big one or a small one? Because I bought helium tanks before from, I think, Party City to do my own like balloons or whatever for a party. So, and I think it was only like maybe up to my knee.
Yeah, it's like one of those, it's not like the tall, like propane tank that you would see for like industrial use. It's, gosh, I don't even know what they like go by as far as what their size, because I'm sure it's like in liters, right? So yeah, it's like one of those ones that like, yeah, would go up to like your knee. So yeah, he had this helium tank and it's set right next to the bed, but he had attached a tube to the helium tank, and he had this clear plastic bag over his head. And what he had done is he had taken the string and he had tied the string like multiple times. So he had wrapped the string around the base of the bag and his neck so that it would basically keep like all the helium trapped. And then, of course, the other end of this tube was up underneath in between the bag and his neck. And then he had literally just turned on the helium tank and just left it on. So basically what happens here, and essentially you suffocate from this. So with any type of gas, and so this is literally why, like in your home, if you have any type of like gas line or gas hookup, gas is essentially odorless, right? And so the reason why they add odor to gas is so that you can smell it if there's a leak, because like you can die from being exposed for a long time.
That.
Yeah.
They add odor?
Yeah, because you can get really, really sick or you can die. Like if you've been exposed to like a certain gas for too long, like you will be violently sick, like vomiting, dizzy, migraines, like all of these things, because essentially what is happening is as you are breathing in this oxygen or this gas, the gas is replacing the oxygen in your red blood cells, so that those red blood cells are going up to your brain, right? And so what's happening, it's going to make you go unconscious. So that odor that you're smelling in the gas, that stinky smell, that's like telling you like, hey, there's that gas leak.
That's so interesting that you said that, because we had our gardener here a couple weeks ago and I had windows open because it was nice outside, and he was weed eating like around the house, and it came in the gas smell. The gases came through the house and set off our alarms. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I could smell it in the house, but it didn't register like, oh, that's in the house. And I couldn't figure out which window. I think it came in through our bedroom, but it set everything off because I wasn't down there. So I had to like shut all the windows. And
so if you have like your pilot light, with your like water tank, they'll normally put like a CO2, detector in there with it. Because if your pilot light, like if the flame goes out and the gas is still on, it will detect that. So,
Interesting.
See, you learned something new today too.
Mostly I just didn't know. I didn't know that they add smell to it because I just thought that it smelled in general.
No, that's why it's right. It's colorless. It's odorless. So it's very deadly.
Like vodka.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why for all these things. And even after the fact, for a long time, we had an investigator get like very sick at a scene before where someone had killed himself with carbon monoxide poisoning. And the fire department had even come through and they cleared it. And they didn't do a very good job. And she was at this scene and she had even said that she thought it smelled. And they cleared it and they said no. And she ended up getting really, really sick. And she went to the hospital and they did a blood test on her. And they said, yeah, it's carbon monoxide poisoning from this scene. So, yeah, I mean, you can get really sick from it. So yeah, basically what it's doing, it's just replacing your oxygen in your red blood cells. And so a lot of times that's also why your skin will change color and the brain can also change color dependent upon what type of chemical is that you're being exposed to. So like with carbon monoxide, the skin will turn cherry red and it's very obvious. So like the lividity won't be like that dark purple color because your blood is going to turn that bright cherry red because of the color of the chemical with like carbon monoxide. I can't remember what exactly the chemical is. There was a couple cases. Now this was also very common in, I want to say it was Korea. A lot of these students had been killing themselves in this same manner where they would trap themselves in their bathroom and they were getting these like chlorine tablets.
Oh.
And they were mixing it, I want to say, with bleach.
Oh.
The chemical gases that were being released would cause them to suffocate. Now, that was a little bit more harsh because it can cause chemical burns on your skin as well and to your eyes because it's a lot harsher chemical. I'm sure you can also make yourself doing that, when you're cleaning. So that's why, they tell you not to mix chemicals when you're cleaning. But there were a couple cases here that came through our office where like one was a nurse and she wasn't doing well in school and she did something like this in her vehicle. And she actually like wrote a note and put it on her window for whoever found her, like, don't open the car. And so you have to get in like a Tyvek suit and stuff. But before we could even open her up to do an autopsy, we actually had to like let her whole body air out for like days so that the rest of us wouldn't get exposed to those chemicals. That's how harsh they are. And then when her skull cap was removed and we looked at her brain was like this blue-green color because of this chemical. So that's basically what happens when people commit suicide by these different gases or chemicals through just breathing or inhaling, especially when they're doing it like at such a high level, like an intoxication where it's just like times 10 or whatever, where it's solely just like this guy was just breathing in helium because it's just replacing all that oxygen in your body. So basically with him though, what would happen is he would just fall asleep. So for him, he would just get tired and fall asleep.
Did he take sleeping pills, do you know? Or does helium make you tired?
No, the helium would make him tired. We didn't find any pills or any evidence of any bottles at the scene. And there wasn't anything found in his system. So strictly just the helium.
Did it run out by the time you got there?
Oh, yeah. It was done by then. I'm not sure what time he had actually checked into the room. I think he was found at, it was 12:30 in the afternoon. And then I got the call there Like, I got there like 3. So he had probably been in there from like the night before. So over, I don't know, 15, 16 hours, I'm sure if it was fully opened, that it probably would have ran out. I mean, within 12 hours, so, or less. And I was asking them, like, hey, who is this guy? Do you guys know who he is? Apparently, he left a suicide note at the scene. I can't remember what it said. I'm sure I took a picture. And he did have a laptop. And of course, they collected that to see if there was any incriminating evidence. They waited until I got there and they took fingerprints. They have this thing, it's called a Morphe. It's really cool. It's basically travel size fingerprint mechanism that they can hook up to their police in-deck laptop. So if they go out to a scene, they can ask someone for their fingerprint. It scans their fingerprint on scene, then they can plug it into their system, and it basically can give them back like someone's identification through that if they have fingerprints in their system. So they were able to do that, and they found prints on file. But apparently, this guy had a warrant out for his arrest from a 1998 indecent exposure. So he was apparently a sex offender, and he had failed to register. So they were coming to get him, and he didn't want to go to jail.
Well, but indecent exposure, and that was, I mean, in 98, that was like, I don't know, what was it, close to 20 years later?
Well, this is 2016, yeah. So
like he must have been feeling guilty on something else.
Well, yeah, there was other stuff. So that's what they were looking through his laptop. So
like child pornography and things like that.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
you don't want to go to jail and be a kid,
a pedo.
Yeah. Basically. So, yeah, that's why I said, sometimes you get these cases and you're like, wow, helium was too good for him, So, like I said, that's my opinion, but...
Well, circling back to why we brought the book up in the beginning, you were telling me about this case, and I said, I didn't know you could die by helium, because we all suck helium, right? To get that, like, squeaky voice or whatever out of balloons.
But when you do it too much, you get a light head.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so...
Makes sense.
I just didn't take that into consideration, that you could kill yourself that way.
Yeah. So, like, now, even if you buy, like, spray paint and stuff like that, you have to show, like, your driver's license. Same thing. You can actually huff spray paint, especially metallics. Some people really like gold and silver spray paint because apparently you can get a better high off of them because they have certain metals. But we've had overdose cases from those. I mean, you literally can look around their nostrils and you can see like the gold or silver around their nostrils because they huff paint. It's the same thing. Anything in moderation, right? Anything can be overdone. It's like food, alcohol, anything can be dangerous. And huffing, paint huffing, yes. So that's why you have to show your driver's license now. I mean, it's like, I think I was talking to Dad about this literally like last week, and we were just talking about like medications, right, for cold medicine. And it's like, Dad said, I can remember when you could just go into the store and you could just get whatever you needed, like over the counter. And he's like, isn't it crazy that this stuff that you have to show your driver's license and stuff? And it's like, well, yeah, because certain medications, like you can make meth. And you can only get so much within a certain amount of time. And well, gosh, like even alcoholics that are homeless, they will even drink mouthwash because of a certain amount of alcohol content in it. It depends how desperate you are.
But again, going back to the book, I don't know if this is in the book, but that's when you said that there is a book about how to, or like ways to die, like how to kill yourself, basically. And we talked about it, if we thought it was ethical or not to have something like this, because it's gotten in the hands of people who don't necessarily need it. And that could be a poll we do on our Instagram page, like if you think it's an ethical book to have out there.
Or just in general. I mean, I don't know. Like, apparently this guy had 2 wives that died from suicide.
Not the guy that died of helium, the author of the book.
Correct, yeah. And that goes back to theory as well. I studied a lot of theory in school about criminals and basically homicide and that kind of stuff too. And in law school, a lot of law is based upon morality. So yeah, it's interesting to see. I wonder what case law a lot of these states or jurisdictions in the United States used in order to overturn that. And then at what point, as a coroner or as a medical examiner, you have to deem it either suicide or homicide at that point. That's kind of a slippery slope now, because that would make it very difficult to be that person having to make that decision, and even being that investigator working those cases, because you're interviewing this person that says, yeah, I was present for that suicide and I helped them take these pills. Okay, well, no one else was there. How do you know they weren't objecting to that? Here, just take a few more. Or, no, I changed my mind.
I think the way that it works is it's very regulated. So I do think that if they have decided that's the path they want to take, then you have doctors who are assisting you in that way, and they're bringing like a certain medication in a certain amount in a lockbox, and a nurse is on hand to watch the whole thing.
But this just opens the door to that argument. I mean, I can see lawyers saying, well, you've allowed this to happen. I mean, what if someone's husband or wife is a doctor and they're like, well, they prescribed this for them? You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know. I just can see the rabbit hole that people would go down to get out of that or get away with it. I don't know.
Well, but we talked about a case, remember, the judge public defender, and that lady was suicide, and we know that she couldn't have pulled the trigger. So yeah, lots of who knows.
Yep.
But I thought that was interesting.
You learned stuff.
I did learn stuff today. I learn stuff every time. But if you have any questions, you can email us at kelly@diaryofadeathinvestigator.com, or you can message us on our Instagram page, Diary of a Death Investigator. And until next time,
toodaloo.